hiking an unruly but beautiful new coast path in southwest Scotland, but then, after I'd yelled profanities into the wind, there were no other hikers around to hear me. This raffishly handsome route would come over all sweetness and light. Look, it would simper, a dazzling and deserted white sand bay. A ravishing spray of orchids. A crinkle of rocky foreshore beflumped with seals. Once, moments after I'd cursed my way through a patch of Scottish jungle, a hare leapt from the sward just as a ruddy fox barred my way, a deer herd pronked down the cliffside and a buzzard mewed overhead. I felt like a sweaty Snow White summoning all the creatures at once, only by swearing rather than singing. We toyed with whether to call it a path or a trail, said Brian Scott, Dumfries and Galloway Council's countryside development officer and route creator. After my solo jaunt on the path/trail's north and western stages, we were hiking a gentler southeast section together. Is there an official difference? I asked. Well, no, but people think path means there's going to be some kind of a yellow brick road. I can confirm there is no such thing around the Rins of Galloway, the striking Hammerhead Peninsula at the edge of southwest Scotland. But there is an admirable, almost realized vision and a lot of potential. Southern Scotland sees a fraction of the tourists that head to the country's lionized north. In 2024, there were 1.8 million overnight visits to the Highlands and just 520,000 to Dumfries and Galloway, and I'd wager most of those don't make it out to the Rins. No doubt about it, one taxi driver told me, this is the land that time forgot. It was clear the area could do with a boost. Creating an 83-mile, 6-stage coast path around the Rins is part of the plan. The path is designed to improve access to this untamed, overlooked stretch of coast. One of the aims was to give people a reason to stay longer, Scott told me as we advanced along the high cliff tops to the Mole of Galloway, Scotland's southernmost point, where a Stevenson lighthouse stands sentry over the waves. The path is designed to improve access to this untamed, overlooked stretch of coast, which, as well as more lighthouses, features ancient promontory forts, RSPB reserves, ruined castles, spectacular beaches and exotic gardens. The Gulf Stream makes this one of Scotland's warmest spots. The problem is, Dumfries and Galloway has more than 1,100 miles of core paths that need looking after. With a team of only 5 to do it, I've been following the progress of the Rins coast path for a while, drawn to the idea of circumnavigating what is essentially an island that no one seems to visit. This year, its soft launch, I was told, seemed the right time. I started on Stranraer Harbour, under the smart arch of Corton steel marking the circular path's beginning and end, using a GPX file of the route on my OS Maps app. From there I walked north, along the exposed shores of Loch Ryan, picking between oyster catchers and whimbrels, the alien blobs of barrel jellyfish, shaggy piles of bladderwrack and a crunchy scatter of shells. Somewhere under the loch's blue lay Scotland's last native oyster beds. During the Second World War they were joined by surrendered U-boats, stowed here before being scuttled at sea. This area was strategically vital at that time, with parts of the D-Day Mulberry Harbour tested here, while flying boats, used to protect Allied shipping, were based on the headland known as the Wig. The going from Stranraer around the north of the Rins was generally good. Highlights of the 13.5 miles included military history, intriguing strandline, flower-flecked tussock and the remains of Iron Age settlements with views to Ailsa Craig and the Isle of Arran beyond. Still, I was excited to finally see day's end in the distance, lonely Corsewall Lighthouse. Erected in 1815, the tower still protects ships in these frothy waters, but the old keeper's quarters are now a hotel. John and Helen Harris welcomed me in. As well as running the place, quite the challenge, in a good way, 99% of the time. They're also among the volunteers helping to look after the coast path, cutting back overgrowth and reporting problems. They're starting to get a few more walkers staying, they told me, and have compiled a folder of local rambles for guests not tramping the whole trail. I could see the attraction of basing myself here for nice day walks. I've stayed in few more atmospheric spots, and the 5-course dinner concocted by Helen's son Richard in the teeny kitchen was ridiculously good. Before leaving the next morning, we had a quick chat about what lay ahead. Helen reckoned I'd already done the coast path's toughest stage. John's expression told me I had not. John was right. The following 2 days, course wall to the pretty harbour village of Port Patrick, then Port Patrick to Port Logan's wide, sandy sweep. Around 15 miles each, were metal testing stuff. But also a proper adventure. I walked amid the sheep-grazed ruins of a wartime radar station to reach moaning seals. I accidentally annoyed a peregrine falcon, which spent a good 10 minutes shrieking above my head. I bounded across hills, high above the serrated rocky shore. At one point, I mistakenly dropped down to the sea, then followed in the hoofprints of a flock of feral goats to get back up again. I also picnicked on beaches I couldn't believe I had all to myself. Shingley Salt Pans Bay, where salt was harvested from the 1640s, and awesome Ardwell Bay, a curve of turquoise-lapped gold. In the late 19th century, a former clown called William Purves lived in one of the caves here. I could see why, on the first of these 2 tough days, for the final miles from Killintringan Lighthouse to Port Patrick, the coast path falls in step with a section of the Southern Upland Way, which ultimately makes for Coburnspath, on the east coast. This is one of Scotland's official Great Trails, and the difference was stark: regular waymarks, an obvious track. I even met a volunteer hacking back the overgrowth. But, then, this trail was launched 40 years ago, evidence of what can be achieved. Some of this will probably have been achieved by the time you read this. At the end of my trip, at the Mull of Galloway's Gallycraig Cafe, Irish sea swirling outside, Scott took on all my feedback. He's since re-walked the trail, and a slew of new work is afoot to negotiate fences, increase signage, build a bridge and trim unruly plants. Improvement works should be completed by spring 2026. Yes, the Rins of Galloway coast path is a little raw, but stick with it. I have high hopes it'll mature very well.